Robertson said he's not hearing any sound. Are you now hearing anything now?
I've got it now, thank you. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Robertson. I'll confirm that as you for being in the meeting. Councillor Harvey, can I get you to confirm that you're in the meeting and you can hear everything?
Yep, I can hear everything now, pal. Cheers.
Brilliant. Cheers, Councillor Harvey. Yep, so that's everyone who should be in attendance is in attendance. Bailey Williamson, thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Can I ask if there are any declarations of interest in respect of any business on the agenda today? If there are no declarations of interest, we'll move on to paper 4, which is a grant of a short-term provisional licence. Members, this application is on page 5 onwards in your document pack. For this item of business, we are joined in the chamber by Paul Lewis and Laura Nicol on behalf of the applicant, Cheverton Investment Limited. We are also joined by objectors to the application, John Bryden, Richard Gray, Ian Massey, Beverly Wilson on behalf of Alexander James Trust. Further objections have been received from Gary Brass, Rory McGregor, Judith Good, Sir Peter Vardy, Bill Hazeldine, who could not be present today but may be represented by others present. I will now hand over to Mona McLaren, who will introduce the report and advise on the procedures for the hearing.
This application has been brought before the committee and it's a 3-year short-term let licence application for an existing host. And it's been brought before the committee because of their objections. And before the committee is in a position to consider the application, firstly, there are a few preliminary matters. Now, these will be dealt with in order. The first matter is whether to allow a late objection from Peter Vardy, who's being represented by John Bryden. The second matter is whether to allow photographs to be submitted in relation to that objection. And the third matter is we've also got video evidence from Mr. Gray in connection with the objection and whether to allow the video evidence. So the first issue I think for to consider is whether to allow this late objection, which you can see before you, which is on of the 5th of March 2024.
Okay, members, do you wish to accept the late objection? Councillor Braun? Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Frampton?
Yes.
Councillor Hart?
Yes.
Councillor Robertson?
Yes.
The second issue is to whether you mentioned, Mr. Bryden, that you had photographic evidence as well. Could you explain to the committee, why you'd like to provide that?
Good morning. It's just, I took the photographs just to give you a perspective of the entire area and how the application sits within the open plan area. And I just felt that it's difficult to explain verbally, where it's much easier if you see photographs and you can see exactly. And they're non-biased photographs, they're just taken randomly. That's the reason why.
Right, if the applicant, if you could provide a response to that. To the late, do you have any objection to the photographic evidence being provided?
It's hard to say without seeing the photographs. No objection.
The decision has to be made whether to allow them.
Councillor Braun,
Now the applicant's seen them, I've no objection.
Councillor Macpherson,
No objection.
Councillor Frampton,
No objection.
Councillor Robertson,
No objection.
Councillor Harvey.
No objection.
Okay.
If you could explain if the video footage was part of the original objection, if you could explain to the committee, that'd be helpful. Thank you, Mr. Green.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. The video footage, just to be clear, I don't normally go around taking videos or photographs in the environments in which I live, but there was one particular day which sort of, to me, exemplified my frustration with a lot of the behaviour that had been taking place in the property in question. And on that particular day, I was moved just to take some video evidence. It was actually to share with my wife initially. And it reflected my, as I say, my frustration. So there were really sort of 3 or 4 videos on the same day. One was at approximately 5 o'clock in the afternoon, or a bit earlier. There were 2 others I had from my terrace with loud music, and then there was one at 10 past 11 at night with loud music going on. So that was it really. And I had sent it to Karen. Unfortunately, the link expired, time expired, and attached to that were some photographs as well of particularly some car parking on the drive and in the road of the property.
Mr. Green.
Karen, would it be possible to respond to that, please?
Here we go. On November 11th, we received a complaint from Mr. Gray that included links to video and images. However, when we tried to access those, they had expired. It was not received as part of the objection per se, but as a complaint. We wrote back to Mr. Gray and advised that these complaints are being received independent of the ongoing objection proceedings, which are to be heard at a future licensing committee meeting. However, we did follow up on the complaint, spoke to the applicant and the day-to-day manager and received a satisfactory response, which we then shared with Mr. Gray and provided a fulsome update from the applicant and the day-to-day manager in that regard. Mr. Gray said he would discuss the outcome with his wife and revert the following week, but we had heard nothing further. So on the 18th and the 21st of December, we did ask for consent to share the video and photographs with the applicant and also to resend the link as we were unable to access. Didn't receive that.
And I asked the applicant, do you have an objection to the video footage?
Yes, I do, on the grounds that Karen's just mentioned. It's after the fact of the objection and ought to have been shared with us in advance.
Councillor Braun, do you have any objections?
Yes, I think given the fact that I understand we can't see it here, we can't link it into our system to see it. which would be unfair then for the applicant and also for our colleagues online. So I would have to say that I would refuse to see the video at this stage. I think it's biased if we did that.
Councillor McPherson,
No objection.
Councillor Frampton,
I object to see them.
Councillor Robertson,
If you can't see them, I object as well.
Councillor Harvey,
I mean, if we can see it, I don't have a problem with it, but if we can't see it, then yeah, I object to it. No, don't feel that strongly about it.
thank you. And I have an objection to it as well. Okay, thank you. So we'll not be seeing the video. Thank you. Can we now move on? Yeah. Okay. So I'd like to advise the objectors, the licensing committee members have received and thoroughly reviewed a copy of all objections prior to the meeting. It is requested that you keep your explanation of any objection to no more than 10 minutes. Additional grounds of objection or representation should not be added at this time. Only the grounds of the objection and representations included in your initial submission may be referenced. Could I invite Mr. Bryden to provide details of his objection?
Oh, yes. I represent Sir Peter Vardy from 2X and Peggy Smith from 7A. Now, Peggy is not one of the objectors on the list, but I would like to explain, please, the situation. Peggy is in her late 70s and lives in the house alone. And she initially objected to 1A when the notification was put up in a post inside the garden. It was clear that the notification that was put up wasn't being able to see by everybody. So there was a complaint put into the board to Karen, and the applicant was asked to position the 28-day notice in a more prominent position, because previously it was inside his garden and you just couldn't see it. So Peggy, who was at that time was the chairperson, understood that she had already objected to the first sign that had went up, and she didn't realise that she had to object for the second time. So I'm just want to make that clear. That the signage wasn't up. Anyway, I'll move on. Here we go. Balmoral Court is a peaceful residential area with 13 houses. You'll see all this with the photographs I've put. It's accessible only through a private road. The responsibility for maintaining the road falls in the owners of the houses. It's important to note that there are no pavements in the vicinity. One incident we had with 1A recently was there was 5 cars parked, three in the driveway and 2 on the outside on the road. And Peggy at that time was the chairperson, and myself and Mrs. Wilson went down to not to look at the cars, just to have a look at the entrance, because we need to get the place, the drive retarred. So anyway, the people came out of the house, and as I say, Peggy, chairperson at the time in her late 70s, went over and nicely said, "Please, can you move the van that's parked on the road?" And she got verbal abuse, and myself and Beverly were there, and it was actually scary because the whole lot of them came out the house and said, "What's going on? What's going on?" So anyway, we left it. So I just want to let you know that recently, and this was in December, a lady that's in her 70s got harassment from there. Bill Hazeldine is another gentleman. He's also in his 70s, and he lives there alone. I'm 68, and I live there permanently. I've been there since 2013. The point I want to make is the majority of people that live in Balmoral Court are over 65, closer to 70. It's similar to a retirement village, and that's how we sort of look at it. We're all more or less retired, and we treat it like a retirement village. It's also good to notice that in this application, 100% of the owners, excluding obviously the applicants, have objected to this. So every single person on the street is objected, and 7X has withdrawn their application because it was 2, which would have equated to 15% of the street. Now we're down to 8% of the street. So 7X has obviously come to terms and realised it's a residential street and done the honourable thing and withdrawn their application. Yeah. A recurring issue is that the Airbnb guests, or whatever you want to call them, because it's well advertised in Airbnb, and that's why I take it from there, they often wander into private gardens, because on the photographs you will clearly see that there's no boundaries in place. It's all completely open plan, and the people that come there for the weekend, or whenever it's normally the weekend, they don't know where the boundaries are, and you can understand that. So they go and play ball, they play football, their kids, whatever. So they could encroach into Mr. Jardin's garden, they could encroach to Mr. Gray's garden, they could encroach to the house opposite, the flats opposite garden. So, you know, that's it, which is a strong point. I want you to understand that the land is communal land, and 1A sits in communal land. So there's parts of everybody's garden that we don't own. It's owned by, it's a communal space. 1A is, in my opinion, registered as a business. It's based in the Cayman Islands. The only contact, I've been there 13 years, and the only contact I've ever had from them. So when I moved into the place, it was kind of accepted that 1A did lets, because who do you object to? There was no licensing, there was none of this that we're going through now where you have to apply for a license. So the only time I've had any correspondence from them was this letter here from Chelverton Investments Limited, and it starts off, the very first line, this is, how are you, how are you doing, nice to be a neighbour. The very first line, we note you have submitted a letter of objection in respect of the licensing of our property at 1A Balmoral Court. So that sets the standard. This is a pure business. The owner of the house, Mr. Saville, I believe, I know it's Chelverton Investments based in the Cayman Islands, but the original owner was Mr. Saville. There is Mr. Saville. We've invited Mr. Saville and whoever representative to our AGM, not even an apology. Didn't even turn up to explain what's going on or to say this and that. It's just a pure business, to be honest. The title deeds explicitly state that all properties in Balmoral Court are designated for residential use only. No circumstances allow for any business activities to be conducted within the private communal area. Mr. Massey will go into this in more detail. And the other thing I want to say is we've got no way of contacting the owners up until now. So previously, they're based in the Cayman Islands, 450 miles away. How are we supposed to find out who to contact in the Cayman Islands. Now we know, because we got this letter on the 3rd of January 2024, and it was delivered by hand through my letterbox. It wasn't emailed or so, you know, it's just, no, really just shocking. In my opinion, it's evident that 1A prioritise profit over the well-being and quality of life of their neighbours. They're causing an unacceptable impact on the local amenity and the character of the area. I've given you photographs to show you this. So just a blatant disregard. Yeah, this is what I wanted to say as well. So I've been looking on your documentation, and it says the reasons for refusal as per council guidelines. So number 1 is location and character. Well, I think I've explained that in great detail. Number 2 is the nature and extent of the proposed activity. Now, let me tell you, there's 6 bedrooms in this house, okay? So presumably they've got a big lounge. So I know on the application, they've put 10 people, but we all know that as soon as you book one of these houses, you can get more and more people in. So we've got 6 bedrooms, potentially 12 people in the 6 bedrooms. Then again, presumably they've got a big lounge, sofa bed, you can have another 2 in there. So there could be 14 people in that house. Now he's on the application, there's 10. So who monitors this? So you've got 6 bedrooms, you've got a big lounge. I've bought this place. If you look on Airbnb, it's 500 quid a night. So you take yourself, right, 500 quid a night. It's your mum's birthday. Let's go. Aye, we'll get another 2 in here. Let's have another 2 squeezed in. Who's going to monitor that? Now, equally along these lines, when you book into the hotel, you take a room in the hotel and you're managed. Okay, so you've got managers, you've got staff, you've got everything. When you book the Airbnb, there's absolutely no management. So they go in there, it's a free for all. So we could have potentially minimum 10, potentially 16 people staying in there with absolutely no management. Now, to say, put the rules in, phone Laura if there's a problem, or go and knock on the door. At my age, I'm not going to knock on somebody's door and say, here, turn the music down, or don't do that. I've already explained to you what happened to Peggy, witnessed by the 2 of us, when she kindly asked and tried to inform them that you can't park a van outside the premises. So that's it. Also, in my opinion, I'm coming to the end now, you'll be glad. The loss of amenity for a residential house. There's an abundance of tourist rooms in the area, abundance of all different standards. You've got the biggest and most advertised hotel on the doorstep. You've got dozens of Airbnbs in Auchterarder. You've got the Cairn Lodge. You've got all the hotels in Auchterarder. There's an abundance of tourist rooms in the area, right? So what we're losing here is a residential property that's in a residential area with all these people, vulnerable people, if you'd like to see. And with that, I would just like you to please consider us and refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Before we move on to any questions for you, Karen Engelberts would like to clarify a point regarding Peggy Smith's objection. Karen?
Thank you. The public notice of information for 1A Balmoral Court was reposted. Given that we were unable to definitively determine if it was correctly posted or not, the applicant agreed to repost the notice just for avoidance of doubt. Those objectors who asked were advised that the initial objections were valid and there was no need to resubmit, but we never did receive an objection either prior to the reposting of the notice or before from Mrs. Smith with respect to 1A Balmoral. We did receive on a co-pending application, which has since been withdrawn.
Just before we move on to any questions for you, I was just hoping if Moina could just clarify our position as a committee legally on, you've raised the title deeds a number of times within your objection. Could you just remind the committee members what our legal position is regarding that, please?
Whether the title deeds permit that kind of activity in a property is a matter, is a legal issue you would take up with the solicitor. It's a civil matter. You know, whether you want to enforce the title deeds, it's not something that the committee would consider in the context of a short-term let application.
I'm going to open it to any questions for you. Is that okay? So are there any questions for Mr. Bryden? Okay. Take it.
You've commented that there could be at any time up to 14 to 16 people staying in the property. Can you tell me if you've actually witnessed that amount in the property?
Oh, thank you, because that's a very valid point. I'll tell you what I've witnessed. I've witnessed 6 cars, right? So you only need to do the sums. I am not in a position to walk in and do a head count to find how many people, but if you do the sums, there's 6 bedrooms. So 6 times 2 is 12. You've got a big lounge and they'll pull them in. See, come on, I'm only being hypothetical. In my opinion, 10 is dangerous. He's asked for 10 in 6 bedrooms. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. I've got a number of questions. So if you want me to stop, I will. Okay. Just to clarify, Mr. Bryden, you mentioned this is a private road. Just to clarify, it's a private road. That's right. And when you're talking about parking, you say there's no pavement, so there's a driveway. Do people park on the grass or the communal ground, or they just park in the road and block the road? You said there was extra parking.
Where they're supposed to park is on their driveway. One of the photographs, so I received this in this letter, and this letter that I got on the 3rd of January. So a maximum of 3 cars may be parked on the driveway. Cars must not be parked on grass or on the communal road at Balmoral Court. So 2 weeks after I received this letter, we went down, 4 cars parked. So I emailed Mr. Lewis and I said, my very words were, you don't have a clue. You don't have a clue what's going on here. So to answer your question, they park, when there's 6 cars there, they squeeze 3 in. They squeeze 3 in, and then there could be 2 parked on the road, which is a private road. Now, you can see with the photographs, it's a narrow road. There's no pavement, right? And it's all communal land. So I've seen one of the cars parked into Mr. Jardine's driveway. So they've used the other driveway, his neighbour's driveway, to park the car. I mean, it really is shocking. And you, with the evidence that Mr. Gray's got, he can explain that to you.
Next question. You're talking about communal land, and obviously there's no dividing fences, whatever, between houses. So do you have your own gardens allocated to you, or is it just the whole thing is just one big communal ground that's looked after by, well, all of you, I suppose, in some way?
It's quite a unique place. It's on the title deeds that when Gleneagles Hotel, or the station back in the day, did the title to both its homes, they wanted it all left open plan so that it went in with the grounds of the hotel. So to answer your question, we all have one gardener. Okay, so we all use the same gardener. So the gardener cuts all of our grass, our own personal grass, and he cuts all the communal grass. So there's a good photograph for Mrs. Wilson and Mr. Massey, where there's actually that much between their two houses, you know, between their two borders. But it's a kind of it's just a rule that we all share, that we respect each other's space. But to answer you, there's no fences, and you do have your private garden where you can do all your plants and all the rest of it, but it's all open plan. And this is the scary thing, when people come in and they can't understand this. So how can you say to somebody where there's no markings, don't go into that garden? Specifically, if there's only 10 people in the house and they're high spirited, they're up for a stag party, up for a hen party, whatever, they're up for a barbecue. This is the whole point. Thank you.
And the other question was, in your actual written submission, you talk about the owners promote a wooded area idea of barbecue. So have you ever witnessed any sort of barbecues going on in what I presume is a communal wooded area?
Yes, regularly. Sorry, yes, regularly.
That's just a very quick question. I think you've answered already. You do have a contact to complain to if there's problems. Is that right? You do have a contact number to contact if there are problems that you witness.
Yeah, I received this letter, but should an issue arise in the future, please let our site guest manager, Laura Nichol, know, and she will respond to deal with it promptly. Right? So, you know, if it's 10 o'clock at night, have I to phone Laura? That's unacceptable. That's taking away my immunity. I'm 68. I'm not going to be starting phoning around people and saying whatever. And I mean, can I just ask for clarity? Just one thing. Is the applicant for the license the same as the management?
We'll come to that, no doubt.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, convener. And thank you for the presentation. I was trying to. It's a lovely development now, and I do know it. I was wondering if there's any history of actually these properties being rented out. For example, when the Ryder Cup was on, was there any of the properties rented out then, or has it always been a private development with no rentals at all?
No, in actual fact, I rented my house out privately before I occupied the house. So to let you understand, my house was built brand new, and I got approached by Michael Jordan, the basketball player, to rent my house for a week. And it was a big decision because our house was brand new and we'd never lived in it. So at that time I had a flat in Glams Court, which is immediately opposite. And I spoke to my wife and my children, and we got a considerable amount of money for that. I don't want to say anything else about that, but to answer your question, sir, yes. Now, any other properties, I don't think so. 7X, which is the one that had an application which has now been withdrawn, that has been rented out for the last 2 years. But in their defence, they hardly ever rent it out. It's very sporadic. You see people, whereas the difference between 1A is a business and it's rented out every single weekend. Every weekend there's somebody in that house. And as I say, I rented mine out for 1 week, and had Michael Jordan, the basketball player. Does that answer your question, sir?
It does indeed. And it just begs the question, if you can rent your house out, why can't other people do it? Because I hope there'll be other big events coming to Gleneagles. It's a fantastic facility. So it's just raises that question in my head. Thanks very much indeed.
Can I answer that one for you? No problem. At that time, there was no requirement for a license. So anybody could rent out any property, any place. Now, you're talking about the Ryder Cup and all the rest of it. The hotel has more than adequate with their 200 and odd rooms to cope with that. And I've also mentioned in my earlier objection presentation the fact that there's an abundance of tourist accommodation within the area. So there is no need for a residential property. And to clarify, I could not rent my property out again because I don't have a license, and I understand there's a severe penalty if you do rent your property out without a license.
Thank you.
Mr. Bryden, you mentioned a number of times about car parking. It's my understanding that there's quite a bit of car parking out the front of Gleneagles Hotel. And from memory, I think there was formerly a putting green there that was also converted to parking for use by the country club. And I'm just wondering, if you had surplus people visiting you, can they actually use that parking at the hotel or outside the hotel?
Well, that parking is owned by the hotel, and I'm not an I don't know the answer, but I presume that the hotel would be expecting patrons, that would be expecting them to come in and use the facilities of the hotel, to have a meal in the dormy or to go into the hotel. You can't turn around and say that's a public car park, because that car park is owned by the hotel. And just to follow that up, if that's the case, well, why have they not been doing that up until now? If there's you know why? I'll tell you why. Because they're lazy. And they say, right, why should we paid our 500 quid per night, so we're paid 2 or 3, whatever, £1,000 or 1,500, whatever we are for the night. So let's just park at the door as close as possible, make it more convenient. There's no valley parking because it's not a hotel. Yeah.
Councillor Frampton?
You mentioned in your letter of objection about children playing ball on the communal ground. Is the communal ground, which would normally, my understanding of communal ground is all properties can use this ground. Is it a legal requirement that's in place for no ball games, or is this just what the residents themselves prefer it not to be?
We have a residents association, because with 13 houses, and I explained about the gardening and the upkeep and the maintenance of the road, the maintenance of the lights, the cleaning of the gullies, all the communal stuff. So on the resident association rules, not the title deeds, the resident association rules, we say no ball games. And dogs must be kept on leads. Just the standard stuff that you would expect. So it specifically says no ball games. Sorry, I'm corrected. It is on the title deeds.
Thank you. If there are no further questions for Mr. Bryden, Monica, could you just clarify the point about the agent and the applicants of the licence for us, please?
That maybe it's a question you'd put to the applicant in this case.
Linda can answer. Karen can answer it for us. Karen?
Yes, in this case, the applicant is Charlton Investments and the day-to-day manager is Laura Nicol of Laura Holiday Lets. The applicant and the day-to-day manager do not have to be the same. The legislation doesn't require that they be one and the same.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Bryden. Thank you. Could I invite Mr. Gray to provide details of his objection, please?
Can I just clarify one point? I will summarise the objection. Is there then a separate opportunity to summarise at the end on any other points, or is that?
Yeah, so you get the opportunity to present your objection at this moment, and then we will return and you can summarise at the end once the applicants has had the opportunity to speak as well.
Thank you. That was my understanding. I'll commence with Roy McGregor from 2X, who has asked me to just represent him. You've got his letter, which concentrated very much on the community atmosphere within Balmoral Court. His concern about the increased movement of people, noise, and the consequential impact on the family-oriented environment. So if I could move on to my original letter of objection. Could I first of all just correct my good friend John Bryden on one thing? The distance from here to the Cayman Islands is not 450 miles, it's actually 4,568, but an easy mistake to make, yeah. Yeah. So my wife and I, we lodged our objection, based very much on the fairly long list of instances of behaviour which we found resulted in inconvenience for us. I've described it as regular infringements of generally accepted standards of behaviour which prevail in Balmoral Court, encapsulated in the rules of the Balmoral Court Residents Association. But I do think it's important to stress that in an area with the type of communal grounds which John is very accurately described, we all have to sort of respect, if I could put it, almost invisible boundaries, and it's mutual respect for neighbours. And I think it's very easy for long-term residents who know each other to behave in a way which does not upset others. I think it's very difficult when you have one property in that type of environment where people are arriving for 2 or 3 days in large parties, usually to celebrate something. I think it's difficult for them to be expected to adhere to that sort of behavioural standard that we all apply. So some of the things that we've had problems with, one of the first ones I mentioned in the letter was ball games, for instance, and you asked a very obvious question about children. I've witnessed adult males playing ball games on the communal grounds just outside our house. We've had a lot of dog fouling, excessive numbers of vehicles. I won't repeat some of the comments about that, but it's been extremely annoying. We've had visitors trespassing on our gardens. We've had people looking through the windows of our property. I've had visitors turning up, certainly on 2 occasions last year, to dispose of their rubbish, looking for our dustbins, wandering through the garden. Excessive noise, that's been caused by music and social gatherings. To be clear, the barbecue and terrace area at 1A is on the front of the property, so i.e. on the road. And, clearly it's very obvious, therefore, to people in the rest of Balmoral Court when let's call it celebrations or social gatherings are taking place. And just I'm not going to overstate this, but on some occasions there has been what I would call antisocial behaviour along the lines of what John described, i.e. the response to his request for a car to be moved. And I've had similar instances. So I don't want to, as I say, sort of come across as I'm exaggerating that. Some people who stay there have been fairly quiet, but I do absolutely stress that a large number of the parties who have come through there have made their presence very, very aware through the sort of behaviour I've just described. The stag parties, hen parties, 21sts, these can be quite emotive because they tend to come across with a suggestion of maybe some quite extreme behaviour. But I do find that with large gatherings in general, it could be birthday celebrations, we very often see balloons up at windows and all this sort of stuff. By their very nature, will encourage people to, obviously have a good time, and that does involve parties. The objection I went to put into 7X had a reference to one thing which I just wanted to expand on a little bit. Obviously that is no longer valid because of the withdrawal of 7X's application. But one of the analogies I've tried to make in describing the atmosphere and the environment of Balmoral Court is it's very similar to me to a block of flats almost. And you've got one common entrance, which is the entrance to the road. And off that, there are no gardens or fences or anything. You have a series of front doors. And it's a cul-de-sac. So we therefore rely on each other to behave in a way that's respectful of others. And as I say, with non-residents coming in, anything which is untoward, anything which falls outside the normal boundaries does impact on everybody else. The regulations are clear to us, i.e. the Residents Association, but I don't think they can be clear to the people coming in. And I think it's very difficult for any management company to really convey that to people as well. Now, I did, as I say, mentioned earlier, I did follow up at one point with some video and some photographs. Respect that we cannot share these with you today. But just to be clear, as I said earlier, that this was caused by some pretty extreme frustration on my part. It's some very extreme behaviour. And I did send Karen photographs I got here today, and I sent her a number of videos as well. It wasn't so much the video imagery. What was really, I found powerful from that was just the noise. Now, I took videos with this mobile phone from approximately 50 yards away from the property in question. And I did that a couple of times during the day, late afternoon, when there was a barbecue in full swing. And I did it again at 11:10 at night. And again, loud music going on. That was how annoyed I was getting. So I sent that to Karen, and Karen came back and just mentioned, she said that she'd spoken to the managers of the property, etc. Now, on the day after that happened, I was walking just out of Balmoral Court towards the hotel, and 3 of the members of the said party in the house entered Balmoral Court. Now, Karen quite interestingly said that when she had mentioned this, my videos and photographic evidence, the response from the managers was that they think that at that particular time they'd been told it was a hen party, which was under the auspices of being an elderly woman's weekend away. Anyway, as they said, it transpired to be a hen party when the cleaners attended the following day. Well, the 3 individuals I met that morning were not female. They were adult males, pretty aggressive, pretty hungover. And when I pointed out that I hadn't really appreciated the level of noise continuing throughout the day and night, I got a pretty aggressive response. Now, we all know nowadays we're going to be sort of, very careful about that sort of thing. So obviously I just said, thanks very much, walked away. But I don't expect to have to be exposed to that sort of behaviour. I find it unacceptable. The other thing I mentioned is that in part of the response was that the policies had been amended for the online booking, and this is for Airbnb, to include various guidelines, one of which was no hen parties, stag do's or other parties. What's interesting is if you go onto Airbnb today, there's a main section called where you'll be with the location of the house. And there are 4 points about behaviour. Gardens are communal, maximum 3 cars, no ball games, no outside activities, or loud music after 10 at night. There's no mention of hen parties, stag do's or other parties. It's only when you scroll down to the very bottom of Airbnb, there's a section called additional information. Even if you go in there, you have to go to an additional scroll down to get to this point about no parties. So it's not at all clear, I don't think, to people booking that this is a priority or B, something that would be actually enforced. So that's that's where I got to. I responded to Karen along the lines that I just mentioned about the experience that prompted me to go ahead and gather just some basic evidence. But you know, I've found on so many occasions myself just getting annoyed that, as John said, what's should normally be a fairly quiet community atmosphere has been spoiled by, you know, behavior from people coming in for celebrations. I don't want to be a killjoy, by the way, and I sympathize that people have been sold a property where they can come with a large party and have a good time with a barbecue on the road, etc. It should not be up to me to have to go out and ask them to quieten down or ask them to stop doing whatever they're doing. That I can't be expected to be in that position, nor can any other resident. It's, you know, we have, you know, we cannot be exposed to that.
Do members have any questions for Mr. Gray? Councillor Braun?
Just a quick question, Mr. Gray. Thanks for the presentation. But in your actual written presentation, you talk about the number that there are some which are some parties which are okay and fine. I just wonder, can you give us like a rough percentage of the bad ones out of 100? And linked to that, talking about the video evidence you brought up, was that linked to just one event, or is that something that occurs quite regularly?
As I mentioned, I'm not a habitual videoer of other people's behaviour. It's it was just that it was a one-off, but it was a pretty extreme one. No, I percentage. In terms of noise and parking on the roads, just general behaviour which I don't think fits well with the community, I'd say 40%. Okay, and at the other extreme, I think there are parties that come through who are quiet. They tend to be smaller parties, probably not linked to celebrations, and they've not been a problem. But you know, I find we're all very affected by the balance.
Thank you. And I have a question for you, Mr. Gray. It's about the antisocial behaviour that you described in your presentation. At any point, did you consider either contacting the agents or their representatives, or the police to, or that particularly the police?
Well, look, I can look after myself. I wasn't going to bother the police with, you know, a sort of verbal altercation at 10:30 on a Sunday morning. As to the managers, I didn't. To be honest with you, I didn't know who I should contact. No idea. I was aware there was a Cayman Islands company behind it, but I'm not going to go to a brass nameplate, you know, tax haven.
Are there any further questions for Mr. Gray? If there are no further questions for Mr. Gray, could I invite Mr. Massey to provide details of his objection?
Good morning, members of the committee. And let me begin by thanking you for the opportunity to present my case. I somehow feel Achilles healed because of the legal position that you mentioned earlier. But I'm going to continue because I think you need to hear this. As you know, Balmoral Court's a private community accessed by a private road, and it maintains an open environment with a consistent look and feel to it when you're in there. The key to this consistency is the continued adherence and implementation of the clauses and the burdens within the deeds associated with each property. At the moment, within Balmoral Court, 85%, 11 out of 13, adhere to the deeds 100% of the time. Whereas 15%, and that was the two applicants for Airbnb up until last night, are selective in their adherence. So we need to step back a bit in time. The deeds that we talk about, it's important. John alluded to it earlier. The clauses in the title deeds are applicable to every property in Balmoral Court. And indeed, these deeds are very specific on what properties could and couldn't do.
Mr. Master, could I just remind you that I've spoken to a solicitor that we can't take into consideration the title deeds. That's a civic matter, I'm afraid, okay?
Right. Let me read the last sentence from that part. That forget it. Okay. I need to go to the grounds for refusal. Your list, this legal position, ground. The grounds for refusal are subsection C, points 1 to 5. And in this, I can't make, is that correct? I can't make reference to the deeds.
What I'll do is I'll ask Moyna to repeat her advice to the committee regarding the title deeds. Moyna?
In terms of enforcement of the title deeds, that's a legal matter that you'd have to take to your solicitors regarding, you know, an infringement of the title deeds. It's not a matter for this committee to consider.
What about adherence to the title deeds?
Adherence to the title deeds is something that you'd have to refer the matter to a solicitor to consider.
Okay. Well, if you look at your subsection C.1, location, character, and condition of the premises. I think the location, if you look at your guidance here, this is your document. Considerations, sub-point C, within a predominantly residential area that there could be adverse impact or amenity for existing residents, particularly blocks with shared/communal entry. I think the application, that point is particularly relevant. If you look at sub-point 2, on page 4, at the bottom, development proposals for the reuse of existing buildings for short-term holiday letting will not be supported where the proposal will result in point 1, an unacceptable impact on local amenity or the character of a neighborhood or area. Sub-point 3, I think my colleagues, other residents have made the point on that.
Matthew, could I just clarify, are these planning, is this the planning that you're raising? It sounds very much like it's a planning guidance rather than licensing. I'm afraid.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So sorry, that's a different committee again. I do apologise, Mr. Massey.
Right. Let me get to my last part. Based on my short term at Balmoral Court, I've seen firsthand visitors at 1A, how they behave, how they conduct themselves, how they park. The common attribute is they just want to have a good time for the short period that they're there. So, listening to Mr. Gray and Mr. Bryant, in the short time, what have I been exposed to, or myself and my wife, while we've been there by the guests, visitors to 1A? Well, certainly one group had a huge affinity for ABBA music at 4:30 on a Friday, to the point where we just gave up sitting outside and went inside. And that was a group of 10, 12 ladies, females, blaring music and equally loud singing. The guests and the visitors, the lines of cars on the road, I've seen coming around the corner where the guests have invited guests, visitors have invited guests for an outside barbecue, and the line was almost up to my property on the road. Convenience parking. There's one instance I can recall at 9:30 at night when we were sitting in the lounge and we looked out and we saw a gentleman with a phone walking up and down in front of our property for the best part of 15 minutes. He then walked up and down Mr. Gray's drive and 4X's drive for the next 10 minutes on his phone. What are we supposed to think when that happens? We're 70 years old, 9:30 at night, dark, and he's from 1A. What are we supposed to do? What would you do in that position? What would you think? To us, we just sat down, crossed our fingers, and eventually he went back. So for us, we don't know what to expect. We've got examples, typically, of what can happen, but you just never know who's going to be there. And there's one thing that someone my age looks, the internet is a threat to us. You fill in things, there is no follow-up to quantify or validate what people are filling in. It's a process to get this. So really, if this goes through, we're faced with, it's not if, it's just when something is going to happen. Something. Your point about the police, if there is, to me, that's the only hope. Anything now, I'm just going to call the police. My wife will just call the police on anything. You cannot make any approach to anyone now. The law has gone so far where your intent is taken as threat. It's all about how a person feels, not what you say. And I think it's not good that people are put in that position when it can be stopped. So from my point of view, I hope that you see, understand the concerns of the residents who stay there permanently as their homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Massey. Do members have any questions for Mr. Massey? Questions for Mr. Massey? Nothing online, so Mr. Massey looks like you got off the hook. Could I invite Ms. Wilson on behalf of the Alexander James Trust to provide details of her objection? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Beverly Wilson, and I'm representing my neighbours Bill Hazeldine, Judith Good, Gary Brasson, James Jardine, and I am chairperson for Balmoral Court. I've only had the property there for 3 years and only taken over the position as chairperson just a few months ago. Prior to that, it was the lady who I purchased my property from, who's lived there for best part of 30+ years. So after I'd purchased the property, that's when I was made aware that number 1A and 7X were used as short-term lets. And I think the points that Mr. Hazeldine, Mrs. Good, Mr. Brass and Mr. Jardine and myself, a lot of the points that we're referring to are, as you say, in the title deeds, are, as you say, in the planning guidance, but they do cross over into every day-to-day living. And I think, and I won't go into specifics because I know that you can't take that, but there is a relevance there. But the relevance comes in is that it's not just inconvenience, and it's not just a case that the owner and the operators of 1A are deliberately not complying to any conditions set by the title deeds or by the Residents Association. What I'd like to make the point as factual is that being rented in the fashion that it is, there's an extreme lack of safety within Balmoral Court. We don't have consistency of knowing who's going to be staying in the property, how long they're going to be there for, their background. That's not what Balmoral Court is. It's a private residential area of 13 houses only, where you build up, you get to know people, you get to know your neighbours, there's a relationship there. You know who's in their property, you know when they're on holiday, that kind of thing. To have someone or to have people so inconsistent that it could be someone there for 2 or 3 days, then it's somebody new, you could have 3 or 4 different parties of people. And I don't just mean celebration parties, but there is a lot of that. You don't know who is living next door to you. You don't know their background, and it changes so often that that's putting us all in a very vulnerable position. We're assuming that they're not, you know, all good people, but, you know, they're not all bad people, but they're not all good people either. And I think the evidence of that has been brought by my neighbours. Where the property is at number 1A, it's the very first house as you go in on the right-hand side. The communal areas are to the front of the property. Next door, these not imaginary, but invisible boundaries. There are no fences, but we all know where these boundaries are. Someone coming along for 2 or 3 days, they don't know where those boundaries are, and you find them walking in and out. My property or neighbour's property, dog walking, children playing, and that's not what, it wasn't built with that purpose in mind. The people that I'm representing and myself, because I'm, as I say, I'm part of the Residents Association chairperson, so we have regular meetings which the owner and representative of 1A have never acknowledged or attended or have been willing to be part of, but we discuss some of these issues. And one of them with Richard saying quite rightly, you know, it is a party house at 1A. To be factual about it, you're not going to have a couple and their dog renting a house of that size. You are going to have large parties of, that's what it's there. That's not what it was built for, but that is what it's used for because that's what it can accommodate. The barbecue for entertaining is on the front lawn next to the drive. That's factual. The number of bedrooms, the number of people that utilise the property, that's factual. The amount of turnaround is also factual. You don't have people, as Mr. Bryden has said, one person renting for 1 week in 10 years. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about somebody coming on a Friday, not somebody, but it rented out from a Friday to Saturday, Friday to Monday, through the week. I think the cleaner who's possibly here has a fast turnaround, because if you don't see someone renting the property, you see it being cleaned. So it's quite evident that there's a large turnaround there. But going back to the safety aspect, vehicles, numerous vehicles are parked in the drive, on the road. I don't know any way that you could police that. If there are a large number of people, it's going to be usually 1 or 2 people per car. If you've got a dozen people, you are easily talking 4 to 6 vehicles. And I think to stipulate there's only 3 vehicles allowed at the property at any one time, the rest have to be used in a communal area. I don't know how that's going to be policed or who's going to police that. The behaviour of the people, large parties who are in the property, they're there for a good time, as Richard said, and you know, everybody wants to have a good time. They're entitled to that, but that's not what Balmoral Court was established for. It's not a party street. So when people come and they want to let their hair down, stag do's, hen parties, large parties, who is enforcing that? It shouldn't be up to the residents to continually on a weekend pick up the phone to the police, contact whoever's looking after the property. We don't need to have that responsibility in policing it. A number of occasions as well where I've witnessed with Mr. Hazeldine, Mr. Bryden, is just a few weeks ago on entering Balmoral Court, having been at the hotel, there was a hen party at 1A, and in the front window they had, and I'm embarrassed to actually say this, never mind see it, and I had my young daughter with me, but there was a naked inflatable blow-up doll in the front window with banners outside and things like that. This is typical of not the type of people that are renting. People are entitled to do that kind of thing. Everybody should have fun. But 1A and Balmoral Court are not designed for that entertaining purpose. And that's certainly not what I want my young daughter or people with grandchildren, Mr. Bryden's young family, they shouldn't be witnessing that. They shouldn't have this fear of who's going to be in that property, what am I going to see? And I think I'm joined in my neighbours in saying the safety of Balmoral Court and the residents who are there permanently, that has to be paramount above a business and people having a good time when they could have a good time, you know, elsewhere, kind of thing, because I think they're impacting on our life, and by showing that we're not just complaining about it, but we're not accepting it, is, you know, the people renting cannot possibly feel at ease either. Not sure if I've overgone my 10 minutes. But I think a lot of the points here that I was going to be specific about, as I've said, refer to title deeds, the traffic, which we've already gone over, the fact about the parties, the large groups of people. Another one was the chairperson that I took over from for over 10 years had no way of contacting number 1A for any reason. And a simple one is to let them know when we were having the next Residents Association meeting. So when I took over, managed to get an email and send that out. But other than that, there is no other way of communicating with number 1A if we have a complaint, if we have a concern. But I think it's beyond that now. I'm just checking on some other notes here. I think a huge part of what I'd like to say is the kind of multiple, inconsistent and unknown occupants within such close proximity to residents is really having a negative impact and to some people's mental well-being within Balmoral Court. It's a nuisance. Many of them are a nuisance and annoying, and it's a great concern. I think that's just about how I would like to end my presentation. But thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? So, Ms Wilson, Councillor Braun.
Thanks for your presentation. Coming back to safety, there's two questions really. We've established there's no pavements on the road, so presumably if you're walking normally, you have to walk on the side of the road, I take it. So if there's cars parked on the road, presumably you have to come out into the road further. Is that right? So your safety's compromised, I suppose, on the traffic.
Yes, so that's correct. On entering Balmoral Court, it's a single track tarmac road with kind of speed bumps there, and then it goes right onto the grass verge. Most properties, with the exception of 1 and 2X, which have a slightly separate entrance, but every other property, it's this one entrance, and most houses are on the right hand side. We pay the gardener annually to maintain these common areas that you talk about, which are mostly on the opposite side of the road, and that is grass. But to have people park on there would not be acceptable. I mean, it would, the lawns are very well kept, and that would just, churn up. It would cause a mess. And it'd be more maintenance. But that does happen when there's several cars parked at 1A, and they're trying to reverse, get out, that kind of thing. I mean, I'm not making out that everyone there's monsters and whatever, but you don't know what you're getting. So yes, safety as pedestrians for the cars that are excessive parking that are there, as well as the safety of who's renting inside.
And the other question to do with safety is the people themselves. You said that I think you all mentioned safety was an issue. Is it the numbers of people in these parties more intimidating, or are things fine when they arrive, but as drink starts to flow, does that make it even worse, more aggressive? Is that really what your concerns about?
Yes, it is. I mean, I think, without showing any specific evidence, I think it's fair enough to say that you would have very few groups of 12 or 14 people who were there to enjoy the views and hill walking or whatever. Even golfers renting, like to let their hair down of an evening, and it's not knowing who these people are. All of us may entertain it at some point, but you have the confidence of knowing, I know who John is. If John's having a party, which I've never witnessed yet or been invited to, but if John, I would know the content and the context, and I know the type of person John is. When you see a large party at 1A, you don't know what you're getting. And I was witness to that particular day when there was more traffic there. The chap actually opened, it was a van that was parked on the road, and when he opened the van, there was 3 large dogs jumped out. They were well behaved, but and I'm a dog lover, but what if I wasn't? That in itself is quite intimidating. They weren't on a lead. They were free to roam where they wanted to go. The chap that was there, they don't know the boundaries, and I'm not just talking about the physical boundaries, but they don't know how this very special, very private street is set up. So yeah, safety with traffic, safety with the people who are renting this property is a huge concern to the permanent residents, myself included.
Are there any further questions? And there are no questions online. Thank you very much. Could I now invite Mr. Lewis and Ms. Nichol on behalf of the applicant, Shepler, I lost the two, so I do apologise if I said that wrong. Investment Limited to provide details of the application and respond to the objections. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to participate. My name is Paul Lewis. I'm a director of Chelverton Investments Limited. It is a Cayman Islands company, has been noted, owned by Mr. Saville, who has owned this property since 1989. Accompanying me is Laura. Laura lives in Octorada, 3 minutes from the house. She would manage the day-to-day operations in terms of checking guests in, being on call while they're there throughout their stay, and checking them out. I manage Laura actively, communicate with her daily as much as necessary with regard to the property itself. As has been noted, the property sits in Balmoral Court. It is a 6-bedroom house. 2 of those bedrooms are single beds. It is very much for 10 people. We do not accept bookings for more than 10 people, unless it's an infant cot, because we do provide an infant cot. The holiday homes are set amongst communal gardens, as has been noted. Our property is overlooked and is easy accessed by the very many self-catering apartments behind it at Glamis Court, Dunbar Court. If you look at photos on page 4 and 5 of Mr. Gray's objection, you will see directly behind our house is Glamis Court. There's nothing to stop anyone from that or any other property in the area of the resort from walking over our land, as happens often. It's unfortunate, but it's the way that the development was constructed. Also on Mr. Gray's photo on page 4, you'll see the front of the property. You will see the barbecue area is at the front on a patio, and it is somewhat screened. It's not directly on the road or on the grass, as has been put forward here. The area in which the house sits is overwhelmingly one of holiday accommodation. It sits within the wider Gleneagles Resort. It is a resort location, not a residential one. It is not a retirement village, and it is not a block of flats. Our property is the first house on the right as you enter Balmoral Court. When walking from the hotel, there is no need for our guests to walk past any other house, in front of any other window, or disturb any other neighbours on the course of walking from the hotel, which is where they would generally go, to our property. As I said, we've owned the property since 1989. It was used solely as a family home until 2012. Since August 2012, it has been used as self-catering holiday accommodation. And in the 11 years from then up until the date we submitted our licence, we have been in regular communication with the Balmoral Court Residents Association. I myself corresponded at least annually with Bill and Jill Hazelden. In the main part, this was just to thank them for looking after the place, to confirm that I'd paid my fees. I've also corresponded with Jill in regard to recycling, lighting. I've never had an AGM invite. Had I have done, I may have attended. I may not, because I don't live in Scotland, but I've never had an AGM invite. We seek to operate the property to the highest possible standard. We use a professional guest manager, which is Laura. Laura's managed the property since April 2019. As I said, she lives 3 minutes down the road. We've maintained a constant 5-star Visit Scotland rating since we've opened the property to lettings. Our ratings on Verbo are 9.8 out of 10, and we're 4.5 on TripAdvisor and holiday lettings. You know, we take what we do seriously, and we try to offer the best possible experience to our guests. In that 11 years, we've had an average of 42 bookings a year over the course of time. We've received 0 complaints from the Residents Association. Since submitting our application, we were taken aback by the number of objections and the contents, because we having been in communication with the Residents Association, we've never received any indication of the purported scale of the issues being suffered. That said, when we did receive the objections, we actively changed our policies as advertised and within our handbooks in the property. The following policies were clarified or implemented. We clarified regarding dogs. The gardens are communal. We advise our guests and we tell them that dogs must be on a lead and all mess cleared up. We also ask our guests in writing and in our policies, which are in the house as well, to please be respectful of our neighbours' property and privacy. And they're encouraged not to walk their dogs in Woodstock Balmoral Court, but elsewhere in the resort. We clarified ref car parking. You can actually fit 5 cars if you park really carefully on that driveway. We've clarified a policy that suggests a maximum of 3 cars should be parked there. And we have stated that cars must not be parked on grass or road. Laura, if guest stars will direct them to park at the hotel, anyone who stays at our house is a patron of the hotel as well. They stay at our house to use the golf membership we have. They stay at our house to use the health club membership that we have. And they would stay at the house to use the restaurants and other facilities that Gleneagles has to offer. We introduced a policy regarding ball games. We were unaware this was happening. And so we've clarified that to our guests that that is not permitted. We've also actively remind them that we do not want loud outside activities or loud music after 10 p.m. at night. And we ask them to respect that. We also clarified there was some ambiguity in our no hen party, no stag party policy, which we've always had. We don't want hen parties. We don't want stag parties. But we've clarified that to include other parties because we try and discourage that. We've written to each of the objectors outlining these changes and also to confirm the contact details of Laura and myself, where they previously may not have had these details. With regards to the objection of Mr. Hazelden, who was a long-time chairman of the Residents Association, he stated that over the years, a number of issues has arisen that have breached the rules, and states that he made requests of the agents of the property and that he continued to be inconvenienced. I never had one communication from Mr. Hazelden in that regard, nor his late wife, Jill. And I have emails here which I've sent to Karen previously, which confirm I was in contact with him since 2014 via email. There was ample opportunity for me to be contacted in the event of an issue, and that simply hasn't happened. Furthermore, with reference to Mr. Hazelden's objection, he describes the property as simply not suitable for people who are residing for a very short period. I would counter that with 2 arguments. Firstly, these 13 properties and the street as a whole were constructed as holiday homes for the wealthy, and they sit within a resort. Secondly, Mr. Hazelden actually booked our property himself in April 22-23. Put simply, his past actions simply do not align with his current objections, nor arguably do Mr. Bryden's having rented out his own property. The only final thing I would say with regard to responding by putting a hand-delivered letter through post boxes is your emails were redacted when they were given to me, and I didn't have your email addresses. That was the only option available. I've been in contact with the Residents Association throughout. I know, I'm aware of that. I did refer to her as his late wife, Jill.
Okay, thank you. Do members have any questions for Mr. Lewis? Okay, Councillor McPherson and Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I just wonder if you could clarify the situation regarding the parking. You say that you could get 5 cars on the drive, but you've told any people using the facility to restrict that to 3. If there are more than 3 cars, people turning up, and there's more vehicles, what are they supposed to do if they're not allowed to park on the roadway? Do they have permission to use hotel parking? Thank you.
We direct them to the hotel car park.
And the hotel are happy for that to happen, are they?
There's no specific permission in place. We are hotel members and members of the golf course and the health club. And as I said, that's why our guests are there. I'd be happy to have a conversation with Gwen at Gleneagles to confirm any permissions if necessary.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks for your presentation. You've mentioned all the restrictions. Who's going to police this? That's what it comes down to. I mean, from what we're hearing, the other side of the coin is there are problems. You know, parties at 11:30 at night, a phone call. I mean, Laura, we didn't get to hear you speak, but would you come out at 11:30 at night to solve the problem? Who's going to police that? Who's going to control the dogs? Who's going to control the number of cars? Who's going to control no hen parties and no stag parties? Who goes to check? That's what it comes down to.
As I said, Laura is just down the road. She checks people in. She meets them. She can assess them. We vet everyone before we take a booking. We don't allow instant booking. If there is an issue, Laura can attend. But in terms of 24-hour monitoring of guests, I don't think any licensed property in Scotland can do that. And we're certainly no different to that.
Convener, I have another question, but it relates to this point we've had, and I'll ask your opinion and the legal advisor's opinion regarding title deeds. The door's been opened by the objectors about this. I know it carries no weight with us, but I think in fairness, the applicant hasn't mentioned that. I'd like to hear the applicant's view on that there was restriction in the title deeds. And I just wonder if you'd like to comment on that. As I say, if you're unhappy for me to ask a question, I will withdraw it, but I believe the door's been opened and it'd be nice to have the applicant's view on that, although it carries no weight with us, but his view.
I'd prefer to stick with the existing position in the sense of I've had to close down Mr. Massey for discussing it. I still believe, given the advice from a solicitor, that it is a civil matter. It's no, it's not for us to decide on the title deeds. Are there any further questions? I have a question for you, Mr. Lewis. It's about, I understand that Airbnb have got a global ban on partying, either invited or uninvited parties. I know that you also have it within your policies, but do the websites that you use for advertising the property also have a ban on parties within properties that are rented out on their sites?
We do use Airbnb. I'm not aware of any specific bans, but we certainly wouldn't list on a site that actively promoted parties. If there was partyrentals.com, you wouldn't find us on it. That's not who we want.
My understanding is that Airbnb do have a global ban on partying, and they will ban the house off their website as well as the applicants to use the house, is my understanding. But my question is well, how, and maybe this isn't for you, but how do they manage that policy themselves? Have you inquired about that?
I wasn't aware of that policy. We don't actively encourage parties. It's not an area we've ever looked into. We simply don't want them. We're very much about family milestone birthdays, golf breaks, spa breaks. We're not about parties.
Thank you. Councillor Frampton.
Thank you. You said that Laura checks people in when they arrive at the property. Do you do any spot checks afterwards to make sure that it is the exact amount of people that have booked that are there and not more people and guests?
Yes, so I check them in and I check them out. I mean, I don't understand what.
So you don't go back to the property any time in between checking them in and checking them out to actually check that the people that have booked are the right amount of people that have said they were coming to the property and not more?
No, I don't go back unless I get a call from the guests if something's happened but no, I don't. I do keep in touch with the guests over their stay. I speak to them on the phone, but I'm not physically there, no.
A follow-up question to that. So if you don't go back and check on check to make sure that there is the right amount of people in the property that has paid to come and stay in the property. Do all the residents in the area have your contact details to be able to contact you if an issue arises while your guests are there?
They didn't have, but the guy next door has had my contact number for over a year now, and I had said to him to give my number to all the residents in the street. I've never seen anyone to do that.
Can I also just add to that, I have put my contact details with the email that's gone out. And also, if someone did turn up with 16 guests, there aren't 16 plates, there aren't 16 cups. We cater for 10.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for Mr. Lewis or Ms. Nicholl? If there are no further questions, I would like to invite Mr. Bryden to sum up, please.
Yeah. To sum up, can I respond to Mr. Lewis's thing? Can I give that a summary? Well, I can sum up. Basically, as you can see, this is running as a pure business. It's running from a company out with the UK system based in the Cayman Islands. Mr. Lewis just mentioned there that he was in contact regularly with the chairperson. Well, sadly, the person he was referring to, Jill Hazeldine, passed away 2 years ago. Peggy was replaced. She was chairperson for 2 years. He's never been in contact with her. And Beverly beside me is the current chairperson. And to the best of my knowledge, he's never been in touch with her either. So where he's getting that from, I've got no idea. There's 46 bookings each year. It's crystal clear that this is a business. This is a business in a residential area. They're taking a house and turning it into a business. He said he's part of the resort. He's part of Gleneagles. Gleneagles is a business. Gleneagles is managed and controlled. Laura has clearly said that she doesn't visit the property. She checks the people in and she checks the people out. Now you tell me, Mr. Lewis said maximum 3 cars. Do these 3 cars arrive all at the same time? Never. If somebody rents that house, somebody might say, I'm going to go early. It opens at 12 o'clock. I'll be there for 12 o'clock and I'll have it all ready. Sorry, I've got my work to do. I won't arrive till 7 o'clock. Ah, okay. The next one, I'll be there at 9 o'clock. Don't worry. So how can they possibly monitor all the cars that arrive? You're going to get some up as well. Laura, sorry, I don't know Laura's second name, or else I would refer to that. But Laura's given her number 1 year ago to Mr. Jardine. Now, Mr. Jardine is based in Bermuda. Okay, so he hardly comes. He doesn't rent the property out. He uses the property for himself. He's a Scottish gentleman, but his business is in Bermuda, and he is hardly ever there. I see him when he's there. He's never once passed any Laura's number to me. The only time I got Laura's number was when I received this from Chelverton Investments, Cayman Islands, dated 3rd of January 2024, which was 2 months ago. That's the only time I've had any correspondence. So I'm sorry, but I do not accept what Mr. Lewis has said. And I'm sure everybody here will back it up. To sum up, Balmoral Court is a peaceful, quiet, residential area. That's what we all bought into. The average age is well into their 70s. Everybody's, I'm probably, Beverly's probably the youngest one here. I'm second youngest at 68. And then the rest of them they're all older people, and we just want a quiet life. That's what we bought into. We did not expect to have and the only reason, now I understand what he's saying, 12 years, I get that, but we've had no position not being able to object. It's only the fact that this licensing law has come up, and we're glad it's come up because you can see 100% of the owners don't want it. We don't want it. So he's delusional if he thinks that it's been great. It's not been great. You've heard about it, and now that this is a legal document that he has to have a license, I personally, I don't want him to have the license, and for the amenity, what he's doing to the police, running a business, and I hope that's enough to satisfy you. Thank you very much.
Could I please invite Mr. Gray, please, to sum up?
Yeah, thank you. I think today has actually been quite illustrative of the contrast of the interests of individuals versus corporations. I mean, Mr. Lewis, Director of Chelverton Investments, as noted, a Cayman Islands registered company, has given an eloquent commercial justification of the actions and policies of that company. So I'm here today as a mere individual. I note the comment that John made about picking up on Mr. Lewis' comment about the 12 years. We don't like to make a fuss typically. I'm talking about Scottish people, British people. It's not our nature. And, you know, I'll queue at the airport, I stand on line, whatever. We don't make a fuss. This license application has given us an opportunity not to make a fuss, but to put forward a reasoned objection to something that we think is unacceptable. So I'm also here today, not just as an individual, but I'm as a husband. I'm a father of 3 daughters, and so security is very important to me. And as I said earlier, in an open plan communal layout, you depend on knowing your neighbours, and we've referred to invisible boundaries, not just in terms of geography, but behaviour as well. And having endless groups of strangers, including frequent parties, you know, hen parties, some stag parties, also, you know, parties which I would say were comprised of mixed group of single adults, plus birthday celebrations, etc. It just creates that ongoing atmosphere of slight turmoil in that particular property. To repeat myself again, I or no other residents can be expected to act as a policeman. But equally, I want to relax in my own property as well, without this lottery of seeing who's going to turn up on a weekly basis. I think that the environment's deteriorated noticeably in recent years, and many tenants show no respect for the community. The shared communal single entry to the private road and the communal land, I think is something that I'm going to come back and stress again, and I'll pick up on a comment from Mr. Lewis actually, yeah. But one dwelling operating in an environment like that really does impact the quality of life. I want to go back to the analogy I took when I gave my presentation at the commencement of the proceedings, and that was to the block of flats, like a stairwell. I grew up in Edinburgh, very familiar with that type of layout in buildings in the city. I've got family in the city, and I'm aware of the impact that a lot of the short-term lets have had there as well, and it's impacted my sister, for instance. And the key thing is that with Balmoral Court, you've got a single point of entry, which is the road that Beverly described, and then no fences, no hedges or anything. Just the property is just off that, and it is like a communal stairwell. The difference in this one is that where Mr. Lewis said that they're at the bottom of the drive and therefore they're not impacting people at the top, that position is akin to being the ground floor flat in a shared stairwell. And not only that, it's a ground floor flat, which particularly in the summer months, when people are outside, has got its door open and you can hear the music. So you do get impacted, because I walk past it a lot. My wife walks past it a lot. My kids go past it a lot, my daughters. And you are impacted. You can't escape it. And that's what we're really talking about here. It's this impact on the amenities of the environment that we live in. And equally, it's like having a ground floor flat, which is maxed out in terms of the number of residents all the time as well. So, and also they're having sort of parties, and there are parties there. So at least if somebody is in a ground floor flat, let's say you're living there, they've got one birthday a year. We get birthday celebrations on a very, very regular basis. And it is something which, again, we feel really encroaches on our quality of life. So I don't feel comfortable with what's been going on. My wife certainly doesn't, and my daughters don't, and our community does not feel comfortable. And that's why we're here today.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Could I now invite Mr. Massey to sum up, please?
Thank you. I'm not going to retrace what John and Richard has said, but I'm trying to rationalize and make sure I understand what Mr. Lewis has said about Laura's role. If I've understood him correctly, she checks in, she checks out, she cleans it up, and she, through her letterbox, is responsible now for the management of the guests, because we've got to call her. And this is where I'm looking for clarification. So I assume that she's been doing this for a number of years prior to the 3rd of January when we got the note. So my mind tells me that when you hear all the situation and complaints and the disturbances that have happened and continue to happen, how good is she at doing that role of policing, of managing the guests? Because with her still there, this has all happened. So to me, it doesn't work. So I'm sorry, I don't mean it.
Reminded about not making personal.
Okay, sorry, it's not a personal thing. That's why I'm struggling to get this. It's nothing to do with her ability. Okay. I think, oh, okay. Fine. Can I just apologize? Excuse me. Can I apologize?
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, Laura, this is not a personal matter. It's not meant. This is in your role in that capacity. Nothing personal at all. 100% guarantee them.
Thank you. Could I now invite Mrs. Wilson to sum up, please?
Thank you. I think I would echo what my neighbours have said there. And also going back to what Mr. Lewis, the points that he was making versus the points that you've heard us say earlier. Apart from seeing it with your own eyes, there's nothing hypothetical here. Mr. Lewis has stated what his guidelines or the guidelines that he's put in place. And that's what it says on paper, but that is absolutely not what is happening in practice, or we wouldn't be here today and putting these points forward. So for Mr. Lewis to say that, you know, there's no large parties, they must adhere to the parking, dogs on leads, if they foul, pick it up, no ball games. It's all very well to say that we ask for that not to happen, but that is absolutely not what is being implemented. And I think also just touching up there on you know, something that Ian had said, I don't think that this is directed in anyone in particular, apart from the owner of number 1A, who is clearly irresponsible in asking one other person to be available for 24 hours in order to welcome guests, police any complaints, clean the property when it's finished and be available. I think that's a huge onus on any one person. So I don't think that they've got or the agency that's looking after it's all very well putting something in writing, but they're not implementing it and they're not putting the correct support in place to make sure that these rules are being adhered to. If that was the case, we wouldn't be here today. But I think I speak for myself, the people that I'm representing, and my neighbours here to say that we strongly object to this licence being approved, and we would like to request that it is denied today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms Wilson. Could I now invite Mr Lewis and Ms Nichols to sum up, please?
Thank you again for having me here today, and just thanks to Karen for all her help throughout. Just to sum up, we've operated successfully for 12 years now. We've never had a complaint from the Residents Association. We have been in touch with them. I'm quite happy to show you emails going back to 2014 with Bill and Jill. We would like to engage with the Residents Association going forward. We would like to attend the AGM. We very much appreciate an invitation to do so. We've never sought to inconvenience our neighbours. We seek to manage our holiday let professionally, responsibly. We're fully compliant with safety, insurance, business rates, you name it. We run this as a business, as has been said, and we try to do it to the very best of our abilities. Upon becoming aware of some of the issues and the objections, which was the first time that they'd actually been communicated to us, we took some steps. You know, we're happy to take steps that we think are achievable and that will benefit everyone concerned. But ultimately, we seek to rent a purpose-built holiday home, slap bang in the middle of an 850-acre holiday resort. The house is minutes from 6 restaurants, 4 bars, golf courses, leisure facilities. I'm not sure that we could necessarily monitor the house 24 hours a day as has been requested, and I'm not sure that any other licensed holiday let in Scotland could either. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you wish to sum up? Okay. Thank you. Could I suggest, members, that we should adjourn for further discussion? Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for your patience. My motion is to grant the licence for 3 years subject to the following conditions. There will be a curfew with no amplified music or social gatherings outside after 10 p.m. There'll be no more than 3 cars parked in the driveway and no cars parked on the street or grass. The manager remains available and her contact details are shared with all the neighbours. We would like to request that you make guests aware of the rules of the Balmoral Court Residents Association and highlight that in your guidance. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Are there any amendments? If there are no amendments, the licence has been granted, subject to the conditions. What I would like to add is if there are any breaches of conditions or a public nuisance, that residents should contact either the manager, the police, or the licensing section. Thank you. Okay, well, we'll resume at 2:15, everybody. Okay.